Romans 12, 1 through 10. Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the measure of faith God has given you. Just as each of us has one body with many members, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Christ we who are many form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. We have different gifts according to the grace given us. If a man's gift is prophesying, let him use it in proportion to his faith. If it is serving, let him serve. If it is teaching, let him teach. If it is encouraging, let him encourage. If it is contributing to the needs of others, let him give generously. If it is leadership, let him govern diligently. If it is showing mercy, let him do it cheerfully. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honor one another above yourselves.
Saludos de la iglesia en Panama, que se llama Iglesia Biblia Amistad. Greetings from the church in Panama, which is called Friendship Bible Church. Okay? Church work is not about Lighthouse Baptist Church. Many churches fall into the error of just thinking about what they can do to build their church up. You know, we got to get numbers here. We got to make sure we have high attendance and things like that. And so what happens when a church focuses inwardly on that, they make many compromises. And it's not about Christ any longer, it's only about numbers. Well, church work is about the kingdom of God. When we truly pray for each other, we are building up the kingdom. Because we are moving beyond ourselves and are thinking about others. When we serve each other, we are building the kingdom. When we are praying and supporting missionary activity, whether in this community or across this world, we are building the kingdom of God. So the work in Panama is not a vacation for Donna and I. Although sometimes we do see some sights and might get a little beach time, although we didn't get any beach time this year. But primarily we focus on ministry. We're ministering to people, we're ministering to the missionary couple, and we're ministering to teachers and pastors and various others. God has called us to look beyond ourselves. And so the Bible says Jesus Christ is the one that builds the church or the kingdom. We have to partner with him in this work. If we do it by ourselves, it will not work. Jesus said he would build his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against him. If we build our church, if we do it without Christ, the gates of hell will prevail. We need to make sure that we're partnering with Christ in building the kingdom. And so in our scripture reading, it talked about us being one body, and that we are dependent upon each other. And the body is always working together and focusing on other parts, not focusing on self. And by doing this, Christ builds the church, his body, and works through the body to build his kingdom. Are you partnering with him? This first particular slide, go ahead, show the first slide. Who would have thought that a 17-year-old girl would be the catalyst to bring us into a ministry about 10 degrees north of the equator? We had our daughter Sarah go on a short-term mission trip 5 years ago. And it was that sprung the ministry of us going over there and training pastors and teachers and doing various seminars. The next slide shows a picture of the missionary friends that we have been friends with for a long time. Randy, he was just a teenager when I first met him. He was 18 years old, and that's when Donna met him. Donna and him went to the same Bible college, and at that time he was just a troubled teenager. And but God got a hold of him, and he now has been a missionary here to Panama for 27 years or something like that. So, and God is doing a wonderful work in Panama. Panama is a fairly modern city, a fairly modern country. At least Panama City is very modern. It has all the electronics that we have here. It has all the cars that we have here. But there are some inconveniences in Panama. And some of those inconveniences have to do with water. Okay? We did not have a hot shower the whole time we were there. Most people in Panama don't have hot water. They just use the tap water. And tap water is a little bit warmer than here. Our tap water is 55 degrees, okay? So it comes out pretty cold. But their tap water is probably 10 to 15 degrees warmer than that. So we didn't have cold showers, but we didn't have, it was cool showers, I guess you'd say. Sometimes, because where Randy and Donna live, they have storage units that store water. And so water is hauled into there and from the city and dumped into these storage areas. Okay? We don't even drink that water. But that's the water that's used to flush the toilet and wash the dishes and all that stuff. Well, they've gone weeks without water before. And because they just can't get the water there. Their septic system, and many septic systems out there, cannot handle toilet paper, so you can't put any toilet paper down the toilet. So, you know, there's lots of inconveniences there. But in their house here, the next slide, you'll see their guard dogs here. Okay? And that's about their personality right there. They're just as laid back as can be. They're huge dogs. They're horses, you know. And but if there's an intruder that they hear, or anybody that's coming up the driveway, they've got that ferocious bark, and they're going to be approaching that fence to see who's there. Okay, so they can be very intimidating. It was actually while these dogs were there, and their daughter-in-law, Michelle, was there, that the guest house was robbed. We stayed in the guest house last year or 2 years ago, and just behind that is all jungle. Well, these thieves had come through the jungle and had stripped this house of all its furniture, all the main stuff in there, okay? Some valuables as well. These dogs were up in this area and didn't even know it. Okay? And Michelle, the daughter-in-law, is just terrified. She says, I am not staying in that guest house. These thieves were actually going around. They caught them while we were there. They finally caught these thieves, but their neighbor this last year got shot 3 times, once in the head by an intruder. And so they don't feel very safe, even though they have these dogs. But I mean, I wasn't afraid of these dogs. I mean, I'd go right up to them. They're just, they look ferocious, but they're not. And so they're going to be moving to a new location, and we've already seen that location. So next year we'll be staying in a different place, and it's going to be actually out further outside of Panama than where they are at, I think, isn't it? Further out?
It's more in the jungle.
Yeah. So, but it's a very nice subdivision and pretty flat, and they can go for walks and have a little bit more freedom. I did a spiritual gifts seminar this year, and it started on a Friday night. I did a session with a particular group. This is a home Bible study group. And if you notice that this guy right here, his name is Joel. We would call him Joel in the United States, but Joel is how he prefers to be called. He actually corresponded with me over the summer here, our summer. He had taken my Greek class, and he was studying Philippians in Greek, and he had lots of questions, so he and I were emailing back and forth, and he, even though he speaks English pretty well, he prefers me to explain things in Spanish. So I had to correspond with him in Spanish, and so it was good for me. But he's a very deep thinker, a very good teacher. He's one of the teachers at the church, and Randy is right there, if you can see. But this is a home Bible study group that meets on Friday nights. There's probably about 15 of them there. And Randy here translated for me. So it was kind of a sit-down, informal talk and discussion. The next slide will show you the leader of the home Bible study. He's Ephraim. He is a very musically talented person. His wife Doris is also musically talented, but he's the only one in the church that has actually had this Bible study, home Bible study. They started a bunch of home Bible studies, and his is the only one that's still going. But it's going very strong, and it has a pretty good variety of people in it, very, very young people to people that are in their 30s and 40s. So a good variety there. They were very good hosts. We had a meal before our seminar, and te gustó la comida casera. That means I liked the home-cooked meal. It was very good. And so it was a good thing that it was more of a discussion, because after eating all that food, people kind of get a little bit tired. So, the next session here was the next night. I actually did the same session 1 of the spiritual gift study, with another group. This is a group that meets on Saturday nights. It's a young adult group, career and college and career group. So it's a mixture of singles and marrieds. But it's probably around 30 people there that night. And this group has lots of fun. I'm expecting to come there and I'm just going to be presenting to this group, but they got lots of stuff to do. Okay, when we get there, they number off uno dos, uno dos, uno dos. Okay, 2 teams. Okay, and they said, okay, now we're going to give questions, and whoever gets the answers, they have a question and answer thing on. We read a chapter. We read a chapter, and they gave a question and answer on it, and our team won. Okay. Then they had a competition where they took one from each team, and they had so many minutes to memorize a particular verse. And so while they were doing that, memorizing, there was something else that they were doing. They were giving out these little pieces of paper that was in a can, and they were to read it, and they were to do whatever it said. It might say, share a time in your life where you were in trouble and someone helped you. Or tell people how you came to know the Lord. Or it might say, you don't have to say anything, give it to the next person. Or something like that. So they have fun with it. Then this competition with the memory verse. The way they did it, the church has squares, okay, on the floor, tiles, I guess you'd say, and they would each start on a tile, and if they got the first word of the verse right, they would move one ahead. The next person would have to say the second word, then this person the third, fourth, and that's how they did it. And so sometimes, this person would be here and would get it right and get it wrong, and so that's what they did. Their challenge, the challenge for this group in the month of September is to memorize Psalm 119. Okay? If you look at Psalm 119, it has 172 verses. Okay? That's like 6 verses a day. That's what all these 30 are going to be doing in the month of September. We're going to memorize that whole thing. So they do a lot. We started at 6:30. I didn't start till 8 o'clock. Okay? And I presented my spiritual gift seminar. And there was discussion, there were questions. After we were done, there were more questions. Randy and Donna weren't there. Actually, they were at a wedding, and they came later, and they had to pull us away from this group. Okay, these guys will stay up all night and just ask questions. So it's a good group of young adults there. The next day was Sunday. That was the biggest day for us. I had a Sunday school class. Then I presented the second session of the spiritual gift study. Now, when we start Sunday school, our Sunday school, we call it Bible hour, starts at 9:45. Okay? Well, only a few people arrive before 9:45. Okay? This is the way it's always been in our church. Okay? 9:45, Bible hour. Well, people might show up by 10 o'clock. All right? That's just the way it is. That's not just the way it is in our church, but that's the way it is in American churches that have Sunday school. Okay? Well, it's even worse in Panama. Okay? Sunday school starts at 9:30, it's over at 10:30. And church starts at 10:30. Well, I started at 9:30, and there were maybe 20 people there. It's people who were just trickling in as time went on. By the time that 10:30 rolled around, they would come in and listen to this thing. There were probably 100 people, okay, by the time 10:30 rolled around. However, the teacher of the Sunday school class usually goes till almost 11 o'clock. Okay? So they kind of overlap. I went till about 1:45. We had the church service, and in this church service, they had a baptism. Actually, this guy is Eduardo. He is this is the pastor of the mission church, Jose. He is baptizing Eduardo, who is the brother of the director of the Christian school that this church started. And he is one of the 5 that were baptized. Each of the 5 that were baptized gave a 5-minute testimony in the service. Okay, so what's 5 minutes times 5 people? 25 minutes spent on just the baptism alone, or the testimonies alone. Then you had the baptism, then you had singing, then you had announcements, then you had all this other stuff. And I'm looking at my watch, and it is 12:15, and I haven't even got up there to preach yet. Okay? And Randy's sitting over here, and I say, Randy, how long do I have? He says, don't worry about it. So I got up there and I preached till 1 o'clock. And do you think the service was done after that? Next slide. Well, there's my translator. Paco translated on this particular night. He's the translator of choice. Okay, or day, I should say. Next slide. They had this missionary team come up. Here, this guy here is Randy's son. See his beard? Okay? He grew this beard for a purpose. This is a short-term mission team that's going to Indonesia, middle of September. They're going to be gone until November the 5th. That's 50 days. Okay? They all have full-time jobs except for one. And they're giving up income to do this short-term mission trip. He grew this beard because in Indonesia, there are a lot of Muslims, and Muslims, it's proper to have men to have the beards. And so he felt that if he was going to have a chance and opportunity to witness to some of these Muslims, that he had better grow a beard. So that's what he did. That's his wife, Michelle, who will not stay by herself at their house because of the thievery. She's going with them. And I think in the back here, I don't know if that's him or not.
No, it's not.
That's not. But they have their other son, youngest son, that's going as well, Jesse. And these two are, she's a Canadian.
She's from Missouri.
Oh no, she's from Missouri, okay.
Teaching at the academy.
She's a full-time teacher at the academy, and she's a teacher at the academy, I believe, as well. But they spent time telling the church about their trip and asking the church to pray for them and also support them because the church is financing this trip. And so, see, church in Panama is not about itself. Yeah, they have missionary teams come and work with them, but they also send out missionary teams elsewhere. This church, actually, you will see the fruits of this church in 30 different countries. They have people that have come out of this church that have missionaries and things like that, and they are affecting 30 different countries just from their church alone. So that was another half hour. So it was 1:30 before we got out of church. Now, was it 2 o'clock? Okay. Now, can you imagine if we had church till 2 o'clock?
Amen.
You know? Most everybody stayed, okay? But it's just the way the culture is. That's their culture. They don't think about time, okay? We're more time-oriented. They're not. Let's see. That evening, next slide, we went to a concert. That's Ephraim, who is the home Bible study leader. He is the conductor of this orchestra, which is made up of some teachers from the Christian school and students from the Christian school. Ephraim came up to me and said, "I want you to speak at this concert." And I'm like, when do I have time to prepare to speak at a concert? Okay? Just 10 or 15 minutes, he said, or maybe even a little bit more. So I'm their break between, you know, they have a little bit of the concert, they have this concert, they have intermission, and they have, I think I came after the intermission. And so what I did is I gave a little spiel, and it's called "Who Are You?" And I basically gave my testimony of finding my identity and who I was and how I came to Christ and how I discovered that my identity as a Christian should be tied to my relationship to Christ. And so I gave that testimony, and I ended it with a question. I ended it with the question, "Who are you?" And the reason why I gave this testimony is because most of the people that were in this audience were unbelievers. They are parents of the people that went to this Christian school. Why are parents, unbelieving parents, sending kids to Christian school? Because this is a very prestigious school. They have very high demands. This school started probably 15 years ago or so, and they started with just a few of the lower grades. Then each year they added another grade until they finally reached to grade 12. From very early on, the very beginning, the first kids must know 3 languages, learn 3 languages simultaneously. English, Mandarin Chinese, and Spanish. Okay? They have a Chinese population in Panama that's pretty big. Okay, so those are the 3 languages that they learn. They probably already know 1, but they've got to learn the other 2. Okay? Parents they are very, in this culture, want high education for their kids. And so that's why they picked this Christian school that this church started.
There's probably 900 students right now.
He said there are 1,200 students in the school right now. So that's pretty big. Caro has less than 1,400. So it's a pretty good sized school. Monday, the next day, was our day off. So we went to this area here, which is their new camp. Their old camp that they tried to develop they started about the time we started going to Panama, just didn't work out for them because the highway department messed it up and they have no access to that area. So they had bought this land long before then, and they decided, well, why don't we just develop a new camp? So that's what they're doing. This was all jungle at the beginning of the year, January. Missionary teams came and cleared out this by machetes. Okay? All right, so how many of you would like to go into a jungle
No way.
and start clearing out the stuff?
They found a couple snakes, so that's
Okay.
no way.
And they got some pretty good sized snakes. You know, like 40-foot boa constrictors. Okay? You don't want to run into one of those when he's hungry. All right? Next slide. This is, you can see it's on wheels here. This is the place where the person stays. It's there. It's kind of like a little house. But this here is hard plastic. And it is practically bulletproof. So it's a very unique kind of plastic. The next slide is one of the trees that we saw in the camp. Those needles are so sharp, the slightest pressure on the needle will puncture your skin. Okay? Now, if you're going to send your kids to camp, you're not going to want them to run around this tree. Okay? So this tree has to go. They've got some pretty good sized trees that have to go. Next slide. This is Felipe. He's there at the camp all the time, and that's his faithful dog. While we were talking to him, a scorpion dropped out of a tree onto his shoulder. Okay? And I pointed at him, scorpion, and he sees that, and he's panicking and getting that thing off, and he kills it. That's all we really saw while we were there, was a scorpion. I don't think we saw...
That's as bad as it got.
That's as bad as it got. So Donna was pretty glad that we didn't run into anything unusual. The jungle can be a dangerous place.
This is 10 acres, right?
Yeah, 10 acres of land,
They're
and
clear.
so they got a ways to go, but they're hoping to get it done and in place by the next year. All right, next slide. We then went to the hotel where they're going to have a marriage retreat. Their next marriage retreat that's coming up here in this month or next month, I can't remember. But this is a very luxurious hotel. And what they are doing is they're giving it half price to the first 20 couples that sign up. And then after that, the other couples pay full price. So they usually have at least 25 couples that usually come to these marriage retreats. And so the church finances the rest of what is not picked up. The cost of this hotel, probably they got some kind of discount, but it's probably about $100 some a night. Okay, so it's not an awful cost. But for people in Panama, you know, some people minimum wage is $450 a month. So, you know, it would be a lot for some of them that were just minimum wage people. So that's why the church picks up half, and these are good things for them to do. When we got the tour of this place, the owner gave us a free meal there, and it was a buffet that you couldn't believe that we had. So that was free. Next was Tuesday night. Tuesday night we had the third session, and it was the smallest group that we had. But here's Willie. He's a Chinese guy that always is full of questions. And this is after the seminar. They're having a discussion on something. I'm not sure what it is, but they came up to me asking me questions about the seminar. So the last night was Wednesday night. Next slide. This is Fernando. He actually lives 5 hours from here. Okay, but he is from Panama, and he's seeing his sister at this time. And this was their Wednesday night group, which was the biggest group that we had. There was probably, I don't know if there's 50-some people there that night. They just skipped the prayer part, said you have it all, and we were there for a long time. It was a lot of discussion and a lot of things that they hadn't heard before. And so a lot of clarification, and they had lots of questions, and we were there for a long time. Okay. After that, next slide. Oh, this is Paco and his wife, and they are going to be the first ones to get their master's degree from this seminary that the church has actually started, or actually connected with. It's a seminary from Houston, Texas. So she is taking it in Spanish. He is taking it in English. They're both bilingual. He's Tim and Julie. They got married a year ago, and he's originally from New York, but he's a teacher in the college there. So he translated for me on one of the nights. Next slide. Jose said, I want to take you guys out to eat just for a thank you. This is his wife, Isa, or Elizabeth. I talked with her. She ran the bookstore, so I went to the bookstore and talked with her in Spanish, and so she was very patient with me, and I conversed with him in Spanish a little bit. But he is bivocational. He works full-time besides being the pastor of the church. And the church is about 150 people, or maybe a little bit more. But the church still is growing in that area of supporting their leadership. And they actually gave him a raise, an increase in support, which is, they're stepping in the right direction as far as that is concerned. But I presented with them after the seminar something that they could take home with them that was not just intellectually stimulating, but practical for them. Okay, had to do with spiritual gifts. Randy later wrote, as usual, Mike always challenges us, causing us to think. Well, they would like to thank you for your support and for supporting us in getting over there. You are a part of this work by your gifts. You financed $500, about $500 of this work, of this trip. And by doing that, you are moving beyond yourself and thinking about building the kingdom. So I leave you with a challenge that is really related to my spiritual gifts seminar. And that challenge is, will you partner with Jesus Christ in building His kingdom? Will you partner by praying for each other, by serving each other, by supporting missionary work with your gifts, and even maybe with yourselves in this community and in other parts of the world? You can go with us on this trip if you want. The plane fare is fairly inexpensive if we get it ahead in advance, okay? You can get it for around $500 to $600, all right? So it's fairly inexpensive, not like going to the Philippines where it costs $1,500 to go to the Philippines. But you can have exposure to what it is like in Panama. And we can send you on other short-term mission trips. If you see something that, hey, you know, this would be a good experience, it would be nice if we could assemble a team from our church to go to this certain country. There are all kinds of programs out there that allow us to do that. So will you partner in building His kingdom by supporting missionary activity by your gifts, and if there's opportunity, by your own work as well? So the question is, better put, how will you partner with Jesus in building His kingdom? And your answer, you need to tell God. Don't tell me. Tell God. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for just the work that is being done in Panama, how you are building your kingdom there. There are lots of problems that they have, but what church is without its problems? They got growing pains. They got issues to deal with. Just raise up that leadership, Lord, and mature them so that they can mature others. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of this work, and how it's blessed, how they are blessed by this church. Even though we are much smaller than they are tremendously thankful for the partnership that we have. I just pray that each one of us, Lord, would be always thinking about you and looking beyond ourselves and thinking about how we need to be serving you in our lives wherever we're at. So we just praise you for being a God who is always working and is always willing to work through us, as long as we are cooperating with you and standing for right. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.